Welcome to the epic, sardonic, the titillating Best Fit Square!
Alright, stir them up, buddy. Stir them up. Here we go, boys. Keep it going. Keep it going. Dig in. Yeah.
As many of you know, Cuba is in the news lately. What many of you may not know is what's up between Cuba and España in the early 1700s. It's complicated. Here to help us better understand this relationship is the leading scholar in the field of carbonation, Professor Tomás. Bienvenidos, Profesor. Let's begin to be kind. Suppose you share with us the little that you know about Cuba and its native population, circa early 1700s. Hello, Manuel. Pleasure to be your guest. I suspect this conversation will illuminate us both. By early 1700s, the native Cuban population, which were living there since well before Columbus arrived, were scattered about the east end of the island, essentially living nomadic lives. There were perhaps as many as 60,000 natives, whose population was augmented with escaped slaves and Canary Islanders, who were on the island as early as the 1600s. Escaped slaves? Yes, indeed, escaped slaves. Slaves had already reached the shores of Cuba, providing, of course, free labor for the sugar mills. Tough business to make a profit. Of course, as one would imagine, the relationship between native Cubans and Spaniards had both benefits and drawbacks. Indeed, Spaniards exploited sugar, tobacco, and of course, slaves. Of course. And the drawback? Syphilis. Which leads me to recall this wonderful native saying, "You're welcome." An upside for native Cubans was being treated as white in the census of the 1770s. Native Cubans, as a result of the whiteness of their skin, were regarded as Spaniards and Creoles. What set native Cubans apart from their European contemporaries was their oblique eyes, slight beard, and typically smaller hands or feet. Incomprehensibly, they never figured as a separate minority in any later reckoning of the population. Unlike the North Americans, they know how to keep people in their place. You know what I mean? Was there a downside for native Cubans? A few. They were, let's see, European diseases, 2 plagues, one in 1517 and the other in 1528, the collapse of native institutions and customs, forced labor in the pursuit of gold, which the early Spaniards insisted existed in Cuba, and of course, famine. Of course. What was the native population of Spanish America at this time? About 40 million. That's rather robust, don't you think? Indeed. What happened? Poof. Vanished. Within 50 years of Spain's conquest, disease, exploitation, famine did them in. All things considered, small price to pay in exchange for being treated as white in future census. Don't you think? Of course. Having conquered Cuba, did Spain lay claim to the island? They did indeed. The entire island for itself. No sharesies. Damn the natives. They were, after all, savages who did not understand the customs and the practices of a modern, evolved nation. Those being, let's see, plundering native peoples, enslaving them into forced labor, exploiting natural resources, then abruptly pulling up stakes, leaving native peoples to fend for themselves in chaos and confusion in a ravaged homeland. Savages. Of course, Spain, in decline at home, finding that a sparse population in Cuba was a serious risk in defending the island against foreigners, tried to encourage more colonists from Spain to move to Cuba. How did that go? In the 16th century, lacking good maps, regular landholding habits, and articulate knowledge of the land, the Spanish crown devised a simple method of giving the land free or at negligible rent to its followers. These grants, or mercedes as they were known, were made in the form of circles. A proprietor was allotted land to a certain radii from a given point. A windfall for recipients. Yes? One problem though. Many grants were vague in territorial definition. Some had ambiguous radii. such as the distance that a cowbell could be heard, or that a cockcrow could be heard, or by squaring the circle with 64 sides. In the end, did Spain's efforts to expand colonization of Cuba win the day? A miserable failure. Left Cuba vulnerable. A catastrophe. So, España, feeling some antipathy from Creole, Canary Island, or Cuban descendants lately? You know what they say about friends like you. With friends like you, who needs enemies? Just saying.